This November, no matter the outcome, we will elect our 47th chief executive. But first, we're going to take a look back at how the presidents became president. This is your countdown to 47. Next up is the great humanitarian, Herbert Hoover. Prior to becoming the 31st president, Hoover enrolled at Stanford University at the age of 17 and went on to graduate as a mining engineer. In 1899, Hoover and his wife moved to China, where he was hired to be a mining consultant for the Chinese government. While they lived there, the Boxer Rebellion erupted, and the Hoovers were trapped in Tinson for nearly a month as their settlement was under heavy fire. During this time, Hoover directed the building of barracks and once risked his life saving Chinese children. At the outbreak of World War I, Hoover aided the cause of getting stranded American tourists out of the war zone. Within weeks, he and his committee got 120,000 Americans back home. He then turned his humanitarian efforts to organizing the Commission of Relief, through which he provided food to millions of people in war-torn Belgium and northern France. Upon U.S. entry into the war, President Wilson appointed Hoover as U.S. Food Administrator in charge of coordinating production and conservation of food supplies. Just one day after Allied and Central Powers reached an armistice agreement ending the hostilities of the war, Hoover founded the American Relief Administration, which went on to provide $363 million in aid to post-war recovery efforts across 21 European nations. He also began the European Children's Fund, which helped to feed over 12 million children in its first 5 years. At the start of the Harding administration, Hoover was appointed the Secretary of Commerce and served in that role into the Coolidge years. He did this all while maintaining his various humanitarian efforts, including the feeding of 10 million Russians per day for a period in 1922. Hoover turned his efforts stateside after the Mississippi River flooded 25,000 square miles and killed over 300 people in the spring of 1927. To provide the necessary aid, Hoover collaborated with 8 government agencies, the Red Cross, as well as 91 local communities. After President Coolidge announced his intentions to not seek re-election in 1928, the great humanitarian was the obvious choice for the Republican nomination. His incredible popularity carried him to the White House that November. Herbert Hoover was now set to become the 31st President of the United States. Prosperity seemed to be on the horizon in America. Unfortunately, this feeling would not last. The Wall Street stock market crashed in October of 1929, causing businesses to fail and unemployment to rapidly rise. The nation was on an unbridled path toward depression. In an effort to relieve the American people of the effects, Congress passed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act in 1930. The act sought to raise tariffs to the highest levels in history and raise more money for the federal government. President Hoover did not feel this was the right strategy, but made the critical error of signing the tariff against his better judgment. America's trading partners responded by raising their own tariffs. This stalled international trade, exacerbating the problem. The nation was in economic freefall. President Hoover tried many strategies to pull America out of this, but to no avail. Around 25% of all Americans became unemployed. Many lost their homes. In urban areas, the poor took to living in a community of shacks, commonly known as Hoovervilles. The Great Depression had now swallowed the United States and soon the world at large. By 1932, Hoover was blamed for the Depression and lost re-election by historic margins to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who promised a New Deal for all Americans. Herbert Hoover served as President of the United States from 1929 to 1933. I'm Eric George for Valley News Live, and this has been your countdown to 47.